Hello, lovely Acer community. Welcome, welcome. This is Anya here today, standing in for Ross, and welcome to our January Walk. We have my special guest that I'm really happy to host today, Danielle Herrera. Hello, Danielle.
Hi.
Danielle I'll just quickly introduce, I'm sure you guys read the bio, but to remind everyone, psychotherapist providing psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy, focusing on ketamine, psychedelic integration and harm reduction psychotherapy within private practice. Her background includes working within harm reduction treatment for unstably housed communities, individuals, and families. This experience exactly informs her warm and emotion focused decolonized framework with attunement to systemic oppressions and violences that impact the individual within a complicated ecosystem. Daniel, welcome. So
Thank
nice to
you.
have you here.
It's so great to be here. Yay.
So, right now we have January woodland walk, so we're surrounded by birch trees and they have this beautiful skin and you can peel it off. And before we dive into talking about your amazing work, I would like to ask you to tell me something about how you feel about the theme of birch tree.
This is perfect. Happy New Year, everyone. It's an honor to be here. So great to be hanging out with Anya. Everybody should be jealous. This is great. Yeah, the birch tree is kind of perfect symbolism for right now. I'm thinking a lot about renewal and purification. A lot of the work that I do um, is around releasing sort of old narratives or old stories or old internalized belief structures that we get from our parents or from society and culture or from people who weren't good to us, abusers and like past relationships who couldn't fully see us, and the way that we take those in and they almost calcify. So I'm thinking of the birch tree and how we get the opportunity to do this really beautiful work in psychotherapy and in psychedelic work, where that gets to kind of release and purge. Yeah, I'm thinking about its medicinal qualities, medicines. I'm thinking about the newness, new beginnings, and the fertility that comes in that, the Celtic mythology there. Um, and yeah, it's an honor to get to weave this dimension into our conversation today.
It is beautiful. Well, the birch tree will guide us today. Brilliant. So let's dive in because we don't have that much time and I have a lot of questions to you. So let's start with this. You describe yourself as I'm going to quote here a tender-hearted, non-pathologizing, Ohlone land, Oakland based psychotherapist who enjoys working with folks who are experiencing spiritual emergence, queer BIPOC people who use drugs, and others outside the mainstream. So I just want to know what inspired you to focus on supporting individuals from these communities.
Yeah, great question. Even when you read it back, I'm like, oh, those are my people. I'm really interested in those who exist on the fringes of society. And so that's kind of who I was capturing, folks who maybe feel like there's nowhere else that they can go. And really, what inspired me to focus on these people is that my family are these people. My mother, I remember, we'll go straight into a story. She was really struggling with her substance misuse, and she held my hand and told me, this is after she's now like 14 years sober. But she held my hand and she told me that if she just had one person who could listen, one person who she could talk to about her experience, who wouldn't shame her, one person who she could talk about her experience, who wouldn't shame her, and she could talk about the ecstasy that she was experiencing, the connection to the divine that she was experiencing in her drug use, that would have changed everything. But she couldn't find a single person, a single clinician, a single mentor, no guidance. Yeah, ever since then, I just sort of locked in that those were going to be the people who I'd be drawn to. And it's really special work. Yeah.
It's very special work, and hopefully there will be more and more people doing this work because it's really, really needed. So thank
Mhm.
you. And I'm also very curious what personal experiences have shaped your approach to psychotherapy.
Yeah, yeah. So mom comes up a lot. I decided I wanted to be a psychotherapist when I was 5 years old, which is so it's an absolute dream job for me. Um, Literally went on a hike yesterday. There were birch trees, and when I
Oh,
was leaving from the hike, I told my partner that I was like, I think being a therapist is the best job in the entire world. And this was coming up because I was, we're planning for a life together where we're like going to get a house. And I can't even believe that that's happening. And I was like, wow, I'm going to be able to take care of my home and my family and and just like the level of emotional attunement that it guides you. So all to say, I've been wanting to do this for so long. And what brought me here was my exposure ultimately to the transmutation and alchemization of pain. So when I was 5, this was because I met a social worker for the first time in my life. And they were in my life for a while. And this social worker was just this, this woman of color who was just like so soft and tender. And she was so different than everybody I had experienced. And she gave me an example oh, this is a way to be a human. And ever since then, I've just been kind of thinking about ways to be that type of person. It's like very heart centered, radically kind person. Who was also aware of just what was going on and not judging, very and having a lot of like unconditional care. And my life was pretty marked by a lot of housing instability, homelessness. My parents, both of my parents and my step parent, all struggled with pretty chaotic methamphetamine and substance misuse. And just really ultimately that was coming from a place of pretty profound levels of unresolved trauma. And so by the time I was 11 years old, I was reading psychology textbooks that I could get from the library because I was trying to make sense of what was going on. I didn't really know about drugs, but I read the description of paranoid schizophrenia. Huh, that seems like something my mom might be going through, is diagnosing her and just trying to make sense of my world. And it kind of catapulted me into the psychology therapy world very young. First person in my family to graduate from high school and then from college. And throughout the entire time, I was doing counseling positions, peer counseling, and all kinds of that kind of stuff. And I've just always been really attracted to working directly with the human and directly with the human heart. And directly in love. So I get to say now that I love people for a living, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
I
Yeah.
love it so much. This is one thing is I must say that that's why most of my best friends are therapists
Yeah,
because they're
exactly.
so amazing, such amazing people, so attuned to the needs. And
Yep.
I learned and rubs on me as well. I learned so much from all the therapists I speak with.
Yeah.
It just really helps like to improve communication with everyone
Oh,
and
for
just
sure.
all that
Oh,
stuff. And yeah, oh, it's such a
yeah.
beautiful story.
Oh, I'm glad. Yeah. Oh, we love you. And that's my experience too. It's like I became a therapist and I'm like, realize, and I told my therapist, I've been in therapy for like 25 years. And I told my therapist, I was like, wait, I woke up and all of a sudden I'm looking around at my friend group and I'm like, oh my God, they're all therapists and acupuncturists and herbalists and healers and they're just all here and they like love me. And this is what we and I just was like, I think I just made the perfect world, you know? So she was like, I know it's pretty good. You chose a good field. Yeah,
Oh,
I get
yes.
it.
Yes, in a way, I felt like that when we had our recent cyber
Oh,
launch last year. And
mhm.
you were a speaker, and Rose was there, and other lovely people, and it just felt so beautiful.
Oh, absolutely. I was just sitting there fangirling to everybody. That's also what it's like, right? It's like,
I
oh
think
my God.
everybody was just kind of fans of each other, and that was the
Yes.
best because I knew that everybody likes kind of like each other. I'm like, I'm gonna bring all those people together.
Oh,
So
that's the best. That's such an important role. Yeah.
hopefully more, but yes, oh, that's. Really beautiful. I'm gonna move on to another one because we have quite a lot to
Yeah.
ask you. We're gonna have to do it again, probably.
Well, I'm all
We're
for
gonna
it.
do part two some other time, live Q&As with the
Yeah.
people because
I love it.
with this Acer community, best people, such good conversations. But in
Um,
the future, for now,
mhm,
I'm really
mhm,
interested if you could just describe to me how do you create a safe and inclusive environment for clients from those diverse
mhm.
backgrounds?
Absolutely. Yeah, I know Acer is like all about safety, which is like so critical. And inclusivity. Yeah. So, a big aspect of this, actually, I was having a conversation at dinner last night around curiosity. And just like what does it actually take to develop an interest in being curious, conscious, and considerate of another person's whole experience. And I think that's kind of the starting point to what is kind of the bigger answer, which is a trauma informed, and what does it really truly mean to be a trauma informed clinician. Um, but in order to be trauma informed, you have to be able to like really take in the complexity and the multidimensionality of another being. Um, and rather than assuming that you could possibly know what their experience is when they say a word, right? They can say, there was an instance of intimate partner violence, and you want to get really specific with them about their specific experience of that. And a lot of it is asking the right questions. And and yeah, I mean, I think another aspect of what comes up here too is something that one of my spiritual teachers says, which is you don't have to like all your clients, but you do have to love them. And I think once you have that, and if you have that, then that sort of natural curiosity will emerge, and you can be really slow with how you attune to them. So the safety and inclusivity, especially for somebody who has like a history of trauma, then means you're every moment is like has this capacity for healing, or this capacity for sort of a potential for a re-traumatization moment, right? So you're just attuning to all these gentle moments. What happens when I say this? How was that? Getting really relational about it. If you're doing something like touch, which happens in psychedelic therapy, you're going so slow and checking in every time you move towards and away, and then you're processing and you're spending time just being really attuned. That's usually what people didn't get when they are holding the trauma in their body, is somebody who is just attuned and considerate and conscious and curious.
That's so true. And I think it's such a skill also to have that listening and curiosity and not put your own judgments and conditionings in. And yeah, how do you work with that? I mean, it's very conscious process, isn't it?
Yeah, it definitely is. And yeah, I think it's a skill that develops. And it's also, I think it's one that you get from integrating your own pain, I think, where you're like, whoa, I maybe there's moments where, and I think we all have experienced this to a degree, like, oh, I don't feel like this ex-lover of mine was very um curious or conscious of me or attuned to me. And so then you feel the cure for the pain is the pain. You feel the full like, human experience of that emotion, and then you turn the other way when you are loving anybody else, right? And you're kind of like, yeah, the classic like being who you needed, and pulling on that. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I get to see how it unlocks parts of people that, yeah, young parts that maybe have been hiding or locked away for a very long time, until they're ready to come out, when it's safe. And that is really, really, that I'm honored to be a part of that work, and it deserves a lot of reverence. Yeah. Mhm.
It does. I heard this very important kind of comment from my therapist when I used to do therapy at some point when I finally trusted fully to be myself fully and say everything. And you kind of said like, yeah, this is kind of where we're ending the therapy. This is kind of what, not ending that, but this is where we're reaching what we needed in therapy. This is exactly, this is success here. And I
Yeah.
felt this so strong, like, oh yeah, this is
Hmm.
it. When you manage to get that bond, you never had this bond with anyone, and suddenly you had like full trust. I think from
Yeah.
perspective of a client is the most beautiful moment when you're like, this person's here for me, to help me. This is,
Oh,
oh,
it's so reparative. It's so reparative because then you have that, it's like you have the muscle memory of being of being able to trust somebody, of being loved, of being heard, valued, seen. And once you have that, the way you move into other relationships is just different. Your standards are just higher because you're like, wait, why am I, like, why am I going to let this friend of mine treat me this way when I have the lived experience of being cared for, and it changes your world.
like
Mm.
100%. Oh,
Hey. Yeah, it's the best
well,
word.
beautiful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
So the next thing I wanted to ask is, how do you implement harm reduction strategies in therapy? And like, why do you also believe they are so effective?
Great, great. I love this. I'm like, am I allowed to say a bad word? Because it's a quote. But my one of my mentors, he was my supervisor back when I was working like training in harm reduction, Maurice Bird, who's a clinical director of Harm Reduction Therapy Center in San Francisco. His most basic definition of harm reduction is just don't be an asshole. Okay, so don't be a jerk. Maybe it's that. And I like that because what does that mean? Um, Truly implementing harm reduction strategies is ultimately like radically loving the person who's across from you no matter where they are. And so, what we're typically trained to do, and the most popular form of harm reduction would be in substance misuse realm. But harm reduction is everything and everywhere. But in therapy school, typically what we're trained to do is to when it comes to something like substance misuse, for example, is refer out, like if they're not, they need to stop using before you can do therapy. And that doesn't really make sense to me because what that's like to me is that you're saying that's the same as like if I had a client and I was like, okay, just don't talk about your husband. That's a primary relationship in your life, but we can't talk about him until you're done with him. How is that? Right. So it's staying in relationship with these different parts of people, no matter where they are, and meeting them where they're at, and having this compassion, no matter what. And working with any positive change, any progress is progress. Um, and finding these moments to, maybe you can't completely change their relationship to maybe even a difficult relationship that they're having with a drug, for example. Um, but but what you can do is you can help them sleep better and help them drink more water and help them be in better relationships with better people. And when you do all that, the other thing does tend to kind of shift. And it's a different way of working with it. And it really just feels like respect, you know?
Oh yeah, I was about to ask. I mean, you kind of answered my next question as well, which is great because I was really, when I was looking into your work, this like meeting where they are and working at their pace and therapy really speaks to me because met a lot of people who didn't go to therapy because they were told to quit cannabis, which was the only crutch they had not,
Oh,
to live. And
mm-hmm.
many stories like this.
It's
So
amazing.
yes, very
Mhm.
important. And I see this trend growing as well with people, therapists, which is really lovely.
Mhm.
So brilliant. And
Okay.
the other thing I want to ask you is a bit less heart-based question, a bit more like modalities, but I'm
Sure.
sure a lot of people are into therapy approaches.
Yeah.
What all
Mhm.
other modalities and approaches do you have in your practice in your
Yeah,
practice? Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, a lot of my work is informed. Okay, so my work is really informed by kind of two primary traditions that are just my personal world that come into my work. So there's my cultural lineage that is just how I was raised and what and I tell my clients all the time, like these are these lineages that are just going to come through because I'm me. I'm not a therapist who is going to be like, oh, I'm a blank slate. I'm not a blank slate. I can't be that. You the moment you look at me and feel me in the room, you capture a bunch. So I tell them what these streams are. The first one for me is my cultural lineage, which is my both on both sides of my family. I have my mother's Chiricahua Apache and Filipino, and then my father's Pasquia Yaqui. So a lot of this sort of like indigenous Native American philosophy, decolonized philosophy is just it's just kind of the bread and butter of my bones. It's just the air I've always breathed. And so I bring that into the work, which is where the systems, I was drawn towards systems, structures, and decolonized approaches because they made sense to me. And I've expanded on them. So the decolonial structures and systemic structures really do kind of inform. I work with a lot of anti-capital internalized capitalist and internalized colonial experiences for people and really unlocking that kind of stuff. Being within that, like you had named in the bio earlier, working with oppressions, working with, that kind of stuff. So that's one realm. The other lineage that really informs my work, that is personal, is I'm an initiate into Inayati Sufism. And this is yeah, I love it.
I
I'm
love
obsessed.
Sufism, so
Yay!
that's just another
Yay.
thing.
We love therapists and Sufis love you. And yes. Yeah. So I've been really, really, really lucky to have found my way into this lineage. When you initiate, you are given another lineage to work with. So I have my ancestors here and I have my ancestors here, right? And so this is my spiritual lineage. And as much as Sufism is difficult to explain in one way, but easy to explain in so many others. But this religion, not religion of love, harmony, and beauty, and the orientation of like heart-centered work is really where a lot of my therapy with folks is. I bring in the heart a lot. I bring in this like I love working within realms of spirituality and direct experiences of the divine, which is where psychedelics really gets to come into play, because so many people have mystical experiences with that. And so those are two primary things, not necessarily modalities, but what they did is they made me interested in the modalities that I have found, which are, like I said, the systemic, the decolonial, also the Jungian, the depth, the spiritual, the somatic, and I mean, yeah, that's the more fun way to put it, rather than telling you like all the different things that I do pull from and weave in. I'll leave it there.
I love it. No, that's a perfect way
Yeah.
to put it, to be honest. And yeah, thank you. And also, you use ketamine assisted psychotherapy in your practice. Could you just tell
Mhm.
me more about that as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. I love working with ketamine. So yeah, I do a lot of psychedelic integration, but I'm able to do psychedelic assisted therapy with what's legal, which is ketamine assisted therapy. And oh gosh, I mean, so much I could say about it, but its benefits are pretty incredible. It's often prescribed to folks who experience treatment resistant depression. So what we mean by that is folks who have tried other things for their depression and it didn't work. And so then they're finding themselves to ketamine assisted therapy. And it can be pretty profound because it does do something that I would say, actually, I'll use Ram Dass here. Ram Dass has this thing where um, he says ultimately that we need the experiences that pull the rug out from underneath us. And that could be lots of different things. That can be these really ecstatic things like having the birth, like a birth of a child or falling in love. It could also be these really agonizing things. And I love working with that range of ecstasy to agony, right? It could also be agonizing things like the death of somebody we love or having your heart broken, right? And just these big rug pulling moments. And I think ketamine kind of does that. I think the psychedelic experience is a rug getting pulled out from underneath you, where all of a sudden the way you thought the world worked shatters. And that can go in lots of different directions, but with it being held, so, having it be a part of psychotherapy means that you have this sort of like doula or initiator into understanding what this all means. So when the rug gets pulled out from underneath you and you see the world from a different perspective, potentially, that perspective includes one where you get to potentially like love yourself more. And that's what I see a lot with ketamine is that people will have these experiences of like, whoa, I actually really deeply care about myself and want the best for myself. And it's so new. or this is what forgiveness feels like. And even if it's not that, and it's these experiences of, whoa, I think there's actually something more out there, and integrating that experience is just, it's such fun work. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so fascinating that ketamine, that's a dissociative track,
Hmm.
right? Actually
Yeah.
connects you more to loving yourself.
So cool. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I tell people because, okay, so when they'll ask me like, how is a dissociative going to make me connect more? And I'm like, it pulls you out of your body, and all of a sudden you're looking at yourself in the same way you're able to look at your friends and be like, oh my God, well, you're perfect. You're looking at a birch tree and you're like, that birch tree is perfect. All of these birch trees, we're not pointing at one and being like, that one's wrong, but this one's right. 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 But you're being pulled from your body, and then you see yourself and you're like, no, you're right. There's nothing wrong with you. You're like, and it's a different experience. We're so
Yeah,
hard on ourselves. Yeah.
we are, and this one definitely allows to also kind of
Mhm.
dissociate from your own little problems because we're so like, the money, the food, the war, the everything. And this kind
Mhm.
of gets you a bit like, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
useful
Yeah,
tool. And then
totally.
after that, let's talk
Mhm.
about integration. How do you support clients through integration process once they have those
Yeah.
moments of opening?
Great question. Yeah, that's one of the ones where the word integration is such an enigma at this point, and it means kind of everything. But I think it's actually more important than the moment of dosing. And okay, one aspect of integration it's pretty critical is that it's like on the clinician side for them to understand that it's a very client-centered approach, which is it's going to look different for each person. The artist is going to integrate through their art, right? The poet's going to integrate through their poetry. The contemplative is going to integrate through their contemplation. So we want to like really so how do we support successful integration is that we know somebody, you know them well. And so that's kind of it. Like there's different methods for each person, but I think what we're doing in it is we're sort of weaving the insights and direct experiences from the dosing session into the day-to-day life, which can be hard because people go back to work and then they're in their rituals and routines again. How do we do that while also giving them opportunities for remembrance? And remembrance is a big Sufi concept, which is that you want to find these moments where you are in direct remembrance of the divine, right? And so if you got that moment of like, whoa, I'm noticing something different, there's a bigger world out there, there's something that's holding me. How do we find these opportunities for you to remember that that happened? Because that will absolutely change your next step, you know? So that's the acorn. Do birch trees have acorns? No,
Probably not. Probably not.
probably not.
But well,
Something.
oh, that's beautiful. Thank you so much. And I know we're running out of time, but I have to squeeze that one really last question. We've done well because the most important in this is how
Mhm.
do you support yourself and your own well-being while you're doing work of caring for other people?
I love that you asked that question. I think that that's like such a critical question for all clinicians who do this work. So it's really big. I have so many. This is one of the reasons why I love being a therapist too. So it's is that it kind of, yeah, it initiates you into, in its in its best form. It initiates you into having no other choice but to take really good care of yourself. And so ultimately, what does my world look like outside of my caseload? It's all of my own rituals and routines of taking care of myself because I have to. I'm working, holding these energies of my clients, and it needs to be moved. And so then I move it around. I have my spiritual practices. Um, my Sufi practices really, really, really do support me in this. And then there's all my own relationships with the elements, water and land, and having community. I have a lot of consultation. That's like the big responsibility, especially for people doing psychedelic work, is to really spend a lot of time in direct contact with other clinicians so that they can get second opinions on things and insights from other folks. and I'm a big reader, so I'm like I've every and it's all therapy books and spirituality books. So it's just giving me more context for ultimately the human experience. And so it's my own integration, right? Yeah, so lots there, but really, really, really sweet work. And yeah, thank you so much for all these questions.
Oh, I just beautiful weaving in of personal
Mhm.
personal work and working with others and community. This is all what Acer is about as well. That's why when I met you, I thought you were a perfect guest for our Birch inspired January woodland walk. So
In
thank you for
honor.
being with me in this Acer forest.
Of
And
course, of course.
yeah, any last words for the Acer community for the 2025 before we
Just
go?
happy New Year's, and I love you all. And it's been so nice to go on this walk with you, Anya. This is
Well,
really,
it was
really nourishing.
great. I love
Yeah.
walking. I could almost hear the snow under our feet making that sound.
Exactly. Yeah, totally.
Oh, well, I will now say goodbye to you. Have a good way back home
Thank you so
from
much.
our
Yeah, I have a
forest.
long way.
You're gonna have to catch a flight. I'm
Right,
sorry.
exactly.
And I
Thank
hope
you. You're
to,
so
yeah, I hope to have you again as a guest
yeah,
in a bit
absolutely.
and talk more.
Oh, we're so in community. Yeah, we're so here. So thank you so much.
Brilliant.
Have a great rest
Have a great
of
new
your
year.
day.
Bye.
Bye.